All right, welcome to our container security group meeting. Just to kick it off, Alexander, I think you've got the first one.
Yes, I was just mentioning that the MR to turn the feature flag on by default is up for review. And I had some concern that if it didn't get merged today, we might not make 13.9, but then I just opened it and it is merged. So that's exciting.
Excellent. Yeah, that's great. Congratulations, everyone. I know that has been, this whole alerts one has been a really big one to tackle. It's not one we could handle easily in a highly iterative way. So it's been a number of releases, but congratulations. I'm really excited with where we're at and that we're able to get this one out. It's going to be a huge value to users. And it's something that I know right now we're starting with just network policies, but eventually that alert dashboard is going to be used for a lot of other things as well, including our scanning, any kind of scanning things that we want to have generate alerts, or even like GitLab, access type alerts, insider threat alerts, like, hey, someone logged in from clear across the world when they logged in from, their normal country 5 minutes ago. That's really odd, right? So there are a lot of security alerts that we can have in GitLab, and I think we're just, starting scratching the surface at the types that we're going to have show up there in the future. All right, Alexander, do you want to walk us through really quick what you have to demo here?
Yeah, so I have been working with the operations team to reuse their alert details page. As all of you know, the operations has an alert list, just like similar to us. And when you click on the alert, it takes you to this detail page. My browser just signed me out, so I can't walk us through that exactly. But I was able to reuse most of their code and generalize it and work to get that to work for our alerts as well. So now if you go to our alert list and you click on the title, it'll take you to the details page, just like the operations details page. And that gives us not only a URL for the user to share with other users, but incidents can be created, alerts can be assigned now, and they can be added to the to-do. And so this got us a lot of bang for our buck, and I'm very excited it was able to happen.
Awesome. Yeah, congratulations on that as well. I'm as excited I am about the alerts working. I'm equally excited about all of the UI improvements we have coming. And so this is great that we're able to get this one in 13.9 as well. So that's great. All right. Did you want to talk about the status change as well, Alexander?
It was just a minor point. There was some issues. This would have gotten us the status change on this page as well, but we call our statuses something different than they do. And so there's a little bit of additional work needed for that, but it will be coming shortly.
Okay, awesome. And so planning breakdown, Alexander, you've got the first item there as well.
It's a lot of me. I just like talking. There is a last session we started to talk about the end-to-end tests for this feature, and we sort of ended up pushing that off because not that many people had looked at it. So here it is again. I've had a chance to look at it. I think Tiago makes a great call out that setting this up, saying in there it says set up alerts, and that is sort of a little bit harder than one may think, but so there's going to be some difficulty here, but I think we can do it. So this is up for planning breakdown. I can't remember what the questions were. Lindsay, can you help me out with this? What are the 3 refinement or planning breakdown questions?
Yeah, it should be at the top of this agenda. They are the requirements clear enough to understand the intent of this request? I'm looking for any like shaking heads, or does anyone have any questions about the goal or the requirements are on us. They're not something Sam's going to clear up. Dependencies. So this is our first set of end-to-end tests for Protect. Vinci is available as a resource to talk to. She'd probably be the dependency I'd call out. Alexander, is there anything on the monitor team as far as the reuse of the code goes? Or is this is all in our own?
That's a great question. We should ask someone about that.
Maybe even code that we could, I don't want to say leverage, but reference. That would be helpful. And then if we were ignoring everything else that we were taking on in an iteration, would this be small enough to complete in one iteration?
Maybe. I don't know. No one here has written end-to-end tests before, so we don't know actually how difficult it is. But I think with my experience, the toughest thing about end-to-end test is setting up the data, and there's going to be some sort of like automation to set up Kubernetes and Cilium and stuff like that, and I don't know how difficult that is going to be.
How much are we going to get help from our SDET counterparts, or is this all on us?
Last time I heard, it's on us. I think we can ping a couple of people here and there, but it's on us.
Okay.
Vinci's going to advise. She's already given us a lot of information. If we get stuck, she'll answer questions, but she's one person and she's a manager, and her two direct reports are also covering, I think, at least one other stage of the product. So we're working on getting better coverage there, but right now she's just there to unblock us.
Got it.
So it sounds like we passed the planning breakdown questions. There's a little bit of concern around the size because we've never done this before. Does anyone feel like we could break this down into more than one issue based on that concern?
My suggestion is that there is an integration with the Kubernetes on the QA side. I think they use Key3D for that. So if this is going to be a high priority task, maybe like I could try to cover the Key3D part while Alexander gets together with the monitor team to see what they have from the front end. And then we would be able to have like a kind of a two-way approach for that.
Samir, could you add a comment to the issue saying that? One other thing to call it is we do have a similar related issue around load testing. I know that end-to-end testing and load testing are different, but just calling it out that we do also want to at some point figure out how to load test these alerts too.
For load testing alerts, the monitor team has squeezed a lot of resource for CAS and Agent K. I think they test like 5,000 agents for single CAS or things like this, because it's a requirement for them to be able to run that on GitLab.com. So I think as long as we have this end-to-end test for our feature for the details within our feature, I think we should be good in terms of load testing. Otherwise, we would be doing the same thing with them. And then I don't know how that would be in terms of the resource for the other tasks.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of the load testing would be to fire a lot of network policy alerts so that we're actually like exercising Cilium as part of that load test. But I agree, that's probably a lower priority. Maybe we move the load testing one out to the backlog for now.
Makes sense. Well, it sounds like based on this conversation, we're going to move the end-to-end testing issue into scheduling. And I think it sounds like Alexander and Zamir are going to be the lucky owners of getting this refined.
Cool. Thank you.
All right. So yeah, I think we could probably move that one to refinement and move forward with it. Tiago's not here, but this create Ruby-based container scanning tool based on Trivy. So the question here would be the same thing, right? Planning breakdown. Is this is this ready to move into refinement? Do we understand the requirements here? Are there, is it small enough? And I don't remember the last question. Do we know the dependencies of the work to be accomplished? We've gone through a lot of spikes already, so I think we're in a pretty good place, but wanted to open it up to the team. How are you feeling about moving this one to refinement?
I have been stuck in a couple of things for alerts, so I haven't had time yet to dig deeper on the container scanning. So that's on me, but I'm not sure about the other guys.
Creatively based. Well, Zamir, you're gonna be working on this primarily, right? So you should check the epic and, and we should go through if there is something missing here, because now Alan is going for leave and we have another project. So we are, very thin on this. So I'm not sure. I didn't check this epic because I wasn't DRI on that.
So from what I've seen, it's spelled out pretty well. I know Adam did a pretty heavy research spike in figuring out what needed to be done. And so I think we're in a good place, but maybe Zamir will give you a chance to look over it before we officially move it to refinement.
Yeah, and can I ask a question related to this? What would be the priority between the end-to-end test and this epic?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think this would be higher than the end-to-end test because this one we need to have done in time for 14.0. So there is a deadline here because we're deprecating Claire as part of 14.0. So Tiago was really hoping to have this done in 13.10 so that we could start to de-risk that and have it actually released and have a little more confidence in it. So it would be a higher priority than the end-to-end tests, a lower priority than finishing out the rest of the back-end work for alerts, which I don't think is very much, right? We've got the support for L7 policies. I don't know how close you are on that, Samir, but I think you've already made some progress there, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it would just be finishing out whatever's left on the back-end work for alerts, and then this would be the next priority. So let me capture that in here too. All right, so this next one, we've made a lot of changes, obviously, to the project level DAST scan execution policies epic. We've not really had a chance to talk through all of that synchronously, but I wanted to just, open that up for discussion. I know there's been a lot of asynchronous discussion on this topic. Specifically for today, I wanted to present just the first epic, actually should say epic, not issue, that I believe is ready for planning breakdown, which is just the MVC of moving things into support for pipeline policies for DAST. I think there is one outstanding question in this. Let me share my screen. And maybe it'll help if I just walk through this real quick before we go into the discussion. So as part of this, we'll be adding a new policies area. And in this, the user will go in and they'll select their security policy project. So they would first need to set that project up ahead of time and then link to it here in this UI. So we'll call it a production project where your production code would be linked to a secondary project that manages your security policies. That secondary project will have a YAML file in it that defines all of the policies. And then in there, it'll reference a scan profile and a site profile as part of the policy definition. A big part of this is allowing an application security analyst to enforce the DAST scans to be run according to the configuration that they want it to run in. So if it's linking to a scan profile or a site profile that can then be edited by any developer, you know, that doesn't meet that requirement there. So we also need to make sure that users will not be able to edit or delete any scan profiles or site profiles as long as they're referenced by an active policy. It's probably not the greatest solution, but it is going to be the most iterative solution. And so for that one, we do have an open question. We have 2 mocks for this piece that Annabelle suggested, which is when you go into the on-demand scans to edit these profiles, it shows this banner at the top and says the profile is currently being used by these policies. To edit the profile, you must remove it from all policies. And then everything down here is in a disabled state where you're not able to edit it. An alternative to this mock, basically the second option here, is just to make it a little bit simpler, where instead of naming the exact policies that are using it, we just show a generic message. It says this profile is being used by a policy. So Annabelle wasn't sure how much work it would be to get the names of those policies included in here. You know, we want to keep this iterative. And so if we can get those names, that's great. But if not, we can just go with this default, you know, more generic message for our first iteration. So I think that that's the only outstanding decision, is which of those 2 mocks. Otherwise, I believe we have most of this worked out and we're ready to move it to refinement. Although, John, I see you've got some concerns here that you've raised. If you want to go ahead and voice those over.
Yeah, I just want to voice my concern. You know, it's just my opinion, and you know, maybe other developers think different, but I see, like, you know, like we will have some unplanned work coming ahead of us from my point of view. And like, for instance, we couldn't finalize our approach with the CI team. You know, we had a lot of change. We were talking about schedules first. Then we realized Dust isn't doing the same. Then we changed to the other thing. And now that we also had some discussions with the compliance team approach. And so that thing, there could be a lot of unseen problems on there. You know, the UX design front end didn't check UX from, if they checked, you know, they can let me know that we don't have front end issues on that. And UX, like, for instance, we dropping down and you choosing a project. And today Alan also raised some things like, you know, can you choose a project, like if they don't, the project doesn't have the policy, you know, like what kind of warning you get?
Any project at all in GitLab.
Yeah, okay, so then we will have a warning. And so little this kind of thing.
No warning. You can just pick any project at all in GitLab.
Okay.
And if it does not have the YAML file, then there are no policies.
There are no policies. Okay.
Yep.
This is good to know. You know, and maybe like what, you know, the PM from compliance team was on the leave, and he came back, and but we haven't discussed, you know, what could be, if we could do something together, you know. And so those kind of things, I'm concerned, you know, that we will achieve what we want to achieve in these milestones. And I'm just raising my concern, you know.
Yeah, so I think some of this is done during refinement. Like the front end issues, there are no front end issues yet because those are normally created during the refinement process. And as far as the approach that you're taking with the CI team, again, I don't know if that would be maybe you can help clarify here, Lindsay, but like deciding our approach to solve the problem, that seems more like refinement to me, but I don't know where we want that to come in as part of the process.
One of our questions during planning breakdown is understanding our dependencies. So, you know, if having an agreement with this team is a dependency, which it sounds like it potentially is, then we should discuss it as early as possible.
So do we need to wait to move it to refinement until we have an agreement with the CI team would be the question.
I would say if there's anyone on this call that's in question, like that doesn't feel comfortable with our planning breakdown questions, which it sounds like John doesn't right now based on this discussion, that we should try and get better answers to his concerns and address them before we move it to refinement.
Sure.
And I just cut someone off. Sorry about that.
Yeah, so like Alan had some MRs, you know, that we said that we're gonna send it to CI team for review, but you never know what will come back from that review. You know, it could be, it's great, go ahead, and you know, it's like, oh, this approach is completely wrong. So I just want to point out, like, you know, if you want to, we are planning for everything to be done in this milestone, you know, it could not be the case because of this lot of, you know, changes and
Sure.
unforeseen things. And we are also, you know, touching a very important part of GitLab. So, you know, just want to raise that concern.
So if we were already like sending MRs for review, then that's like even past refinement. That's like in development, right?
Well, that Alan did this, yeah. Alan, would you like to say something on that?
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, what we want to have is quick feedback loop, like it either from CI team or from the customers. So that's why we started working on this one, even though like not everything was polished and not everything was clarified in terms of requirements and so on. So we already have something already. I believe like 30% of the work is merged right now, and now we're working towards like another step. And we agreed with the CI team that as soon as we'll have something for them to show and ready to be merged, we should just ask them for review and so on. I believe for the MVC, especially that we're behind the feature flag and so on, like even though our approach might not be like the best one, I believe they will agree, and then we'll just enhance that in the like next milestones. So I'm not really worried about that. Not because I'm going to burn the leaf for like a month, and but yeah, I'm not worried about that because I truly believe like we have two approaches ready. Like we need to choose which one we're gonna take. The one thing I have back to our questions from the planning breakdown, back to the mock that was prepared by UX team. We have either simpler approach, I believe that could fit for our MVC better. Instead of showing the warning that, oh, this profile is already used by someone in active policy, we could just respond with error message. I know that's not really a super like convenient from the UX point of view because, oh, you modify something, then you click save, and then you see that, oh, you cannot modify it because it is already assigned to different thing and different policy. But that will be the simplest approach. Like we can have that really quickly. Like in terms of warning and rendering that and preparing all the thing for the front end, that might be take a little bit longer. So if you want to find the easiest path, I would go with this one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds great. So yeah, we'll finalize then on that simpler mock. But back to John's concern, I mean, just to clarify, maybe some of this is just a clarification about what this planning breakdown is. Like as part of planning breakdown, we're not committing to release it in a certain milestone. That's not part of planning breakdown. So, you know, if you're not sure if it's going to make it in 13.9 or if it's going to be 13.10 or even, you know, 14.10, right? Like we don't have to worry about that right now. You're not committing to having it released in 13.9 by moving it from planning breakdown to refinement. Normally, once we move it from planning breakdown to refinement, that's when it goes to you to refine and create all of the issues for implementation. and then we start doing the development work, right? So I think we may have skipped some steps earlier on, or maybe Alan's just coded things really fast. But in any case, like right now, we're just trying to make sure that the requirements are clear and that we don't have any outstanding concerns about what we're doing.
Right. We do ask the question whether it's small enough to fit in one iteration. To Sam's point, we're not saying that it needs to be released in one iteration. That's just a question of size and whether we can break it down smaller.
Okay. Also, Alan, you said 30%, right? Not 90%.
Yes, fairly.
Just to clarify the text there,
That
because
is
a different
it is 30, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, thank you for correcting that.
Okay.
So if the big dependency around the CI team is handled to a degree because they're aware that we're making these changes, we've already got a connection with people on the team who can give us that quick turnaround. I guess the only question that's still sort of unclear to me is, does everybody understand the requirements? I think that's the main question that's blocking us from moving this to refinement. Does anyone not understand the requirements and feel that they need to get more details before we move this to refinement?
So yeah, there's just we didn't finalize the issues, and we have MRs now. So I'm it's feeling disorganized here.
Yeah, no, I agree. And we did kind of skip some steps, and I'm not trying to punish Alan for wanting to move quickly and get something out there to be seen, but it does sort of change our process a little bit. So I'm not sure what to say about that. Alan, do you want to talk about how far you've coded this, how this relates to our refinement and planning breakdown, your thoughts on how we should move forward in our existing planning process, given the progress that you've made already?
So with such big changes and big epics that touches many parts of GitLab, I believe the best approach is to first try to code things, even though like it's not fully working like happy path, because otherwise we are really not sure how to develop think how to split it into implementation issues and so on. So that's why I first started with some MVC, with being able to do something, because I was not aware like how I can work on things. That is why I did that. Maybe we could think about the improvement to the process if we're talking about big epics and big things that we are unsure about, like the code base, because we're not doing like something that we used to do because that's something new. Maybe we should spend like a one milestone just to try to code it, even though it's not perfect, just to get some answers from other teams and from the code itself as well. So that's why the process looked a little bit different, because I had to get those answers first, and from the code. And now that I know already what I know, I can move on with implementation issues and so on. And yeah, it looks like the work is done, and then we're trying to adapt those issues to the work that was done. Yeah, sometimes it's the best approach in my opinion.
Yeah, this is just a byproduct, I think, us doing lots of research spikes beforehand. And so there's not really like a research spike phase in our workflow, but when you do research spikes, sometimes you come out of that with some code.
And we've seen this pattern a few times recently, and Alan's been involved in a lot of between the generic report schemas and the Jira issue creation. I like the idea of addressing this in our process. So I'm going to take a note on that, Alan. And I'm just going to add a comment in the retrospective issue, and we can look at adding an optional research spike / POC to the early phases of planning, breakdown, refinement, epic creation.
Yeah, that's great.
John, does that clear up sort of where we're at from a process perspective?
Yes. Thank you.
So I know we are at time. If you need to drop off, please feel free. I'm going to keep going because I have a little bit of time, and I think there's a few things that we still need to discuss. But again, if you need to drop off, please go ahead. So John, I know you've had a lot of concern about the overlap with the compliance team, and there definitely is some overlap here, especially with the MVC. You know, I keep asking, please give me at least until today. Actually, our product manager there is having blackouts because of the snow in Texas, so it might actually be tomorrow. But give me a chance to talk with him. I've talked with him before, you know, so this is not a new conversation for us. We've actually, you know, I posted the video of when we've talked about it before, and we've actually talked about it months before that as well in much more depth. It just wasn't recorded. So we'll go through, we'll explore it in more depth. I'm going to keep an open mind and see if there's somehow some way we can easily combine our work here.
Yes.
But, you know, I'll let you know at the end of today or tomorrow whenever I'm able to talk with him. But I don't think that things will change. I just really don't. We've looked at it in the past. I think the problems that we're trying to solve are different enough, and the people that we're solving them for are different enough that I think it's going to be hard for us to try to do the exact same thing. But maybe, and if there is a way for us to combine our work on the front end, that's great. But I don't expect that to be the outcome. Now, that being said, if you want to reuse things on the back end, kind of like what we did with Monitor is a great example, because, you know, the Monitor team is targeting a very different persona from us, right? They're talking in a network operations center that keeps the cluster up and running, whereas we're targeting a security user. So they're two very different people, very different jobs, but we could reuse the back end code. If there's a way to do that on the back end, then, you know, that's great. I'm very supportive of that. I think from a product perspective, it's going to be unlikely that we're able to have good overlap there, though. Maybe, you know, with this MVC, but in the long-term vision, probably not.
Yeah. I think this alert was like a good example, you know, like we could have like a different experience, user experience. You could have a different UI, but in backend, you could do the same thing. Yep. So like what I was thinking, but maybe there is an overlap like this versus you create a security compliance thing with a completely different workflow from user's point of view, with a complete like UI. At the backend is just a compliance policy, but you don't reflect that on compliance UI as well. You know, you have this, you know, and we at the backend we use the same code, you know. So yeah, that kind of overlap, because a lot of the things that we want to solve, they are working on it, like two-step verification, inheritance of groups. You know, those are big problems they're already working on. So, you know, we should think overlaps like this, like, you know, not like, you know, you're gonna go to compliance UI and configure a security thing, but, you know, maybe we can have a different UI and different user experience, but that's actually a compliance thing, but user doesn't know, you know.
Yeah,
that kind of overlap I'm looking for, you know.
Yeah, please do look for those overlaps on the back end. I mean, I think that's separate from the product requirements. You know, that responsibility falls on you as engineers to make sure that we're not, you know, building the exact same thing twice. But you know, on the product side, I'm worried about the end user experience and what they're exposed to. So as long as you're able to meet those end product requirements, like, it's up to you how you go about doing that.
All right.
Yeah, one comment.
Oh,
go ahead, Alexander.
Okay. No, go ahead, Alan.
Okay, so what's inconvenient like right now, and that's why we have this discussion, is that we're working on the same feature at the same time, and it's hard to know if we're going to reuse something from their code or not. So that's why like the easiest path would be, even though we're going to have some duplication, just do two separate ways. And at some point, if we decide, oh, we should reuse that because we're duplicating our work, then we'll spend some time on refactoring that. Well, maybe one milestone. Like, we're in the MVC phase. We don't know what will be the feedback from the end users, because maybe they'll love it. Maybe they'll say, oh, we don't need like fancy UI. I love the YAML file creation or something like that. Like, we don't know it. So just do a little as we can, and at some point decide what to do next. Like, that will be the best option probably right now.
Yeah, and I was gonna add, Sam, you were mentioning about the work of like seeing what other teams are doing on the engineering side and bringing into what we can use falls on the engineer. And I don't necessarily agree with that, but I also don't know what, I think it falls on the team as a whole, because, you know, us as engineers, we're working on our code base, we're working on features, we're doing our thing. And like, there are other channels we're listening to development, front end, back end, whatever. And I think John found this overlap of compliance by chance. I think he just randomly, there's an opportunity to reuse code here. I think and so it's hard for engineers. There is no good way right now for any of us, I would say, to like get a scope of everything that's going on in GitLab and be like, oh, we're doing something similar to that. And so I think it falls on the whole team. If anyone gets a whiff probably by chance of like, oh, this team's doing something similar, this team's doing something similar, to like ping the entire team as soon as you find out about it in the channel, being like, hey, they're doing something similar. And then that alerts everyone, puts it on our radars, and whereas it might not have been originally. So
yeah, that's fair. And I agree with that. I think, in saying that it's incumbent on the engineers, I'm referring to like not identifying the potential overlaps necessarily. I agree with you that that's a shared team responsibility, but then once that something is identified, right, working out the details of, are we going to share code? Are we not going to share code? I mean, that falls pretty squarely on the engineers. Just as far as this compliance issue goes, like I was aware that they were going to be working on it. I actually thought it was going to be quite far into the future. So I think Matt left on paternity leave. They ended up working on it. I don't know the exact timing. I was under the impression that we were ahead of them. Turns out they're ahead of us. So I was not trying to withhold that information from the team. I just thought that, we were first, and when they got to it, they would be working with us. Turns out it's the other way around. But yeah, Alexander, I definitely agree with you there that identifying the areas of overlap, we should all keep an eye out on that.
Yeah, and and you alert, like when I first joined this team, you alerted me that Monitor had something very similar, and I definitely agree. Like whether we can share code falls on the engineer, and it didn't work out for the list, but now I knew they had this thing, and it ended up working out for the details, which is excellent. And so thank you for that, and we'll just all keep an eye out from now on.
Absolutely. Okay, so with those clarifications, I mean, granted, there is a chance that all of this will change after I talk with Matt Gonzalez, but assuming for the moment that that's unlikely, do we feel comfortable moving this to refinement where we start creating issues, implementation issues, or are there still concerns? And it's okay either way. I'm just, I want to kind of close this conversation out and have some definite action items. If we're not comfortable, we need to identify, what needs to change before we are ready to move it to refinement.
I can tell. Like from my point of view, maybe I'm too optimistic with all of that. For me, like we already have something that's working. It's like Happy Path is working. We need to work on some details with Jan. We already have the connection with CI team. Jan did the great work, like talking with compliance and like getting to know where we can overlap. In terms of requirements, everything's clear from my side. If there's anything, like every single day we're learning something new about that, so we're trying to ask those questions in the issues or epics. But as far as I can tell, like I'm pretty confident that it's all clear now.
Like for me, is what we need to do is clear, but I'm just pointing out there could be a lot of unforeseeable, things that we have to deal with. Like we already had this lot of change during the refinement. So I'm just pointing out that, it might not fit into our planning. That's it.
And that's okay. Like I said, we're not committing to release this in 13.9 by moving it to refinement. We're just moving it on to the next stage of development.
And during that refinement, please keep that complexity in mind when you add weights to your issues, right? Weight isn't supposed to be the amount of hours it takes to get something done. It's supposed to be a measure of complexity. So if you've got that risk, make sure you weight things accordingly.
Zamir, I know you had a comment in here. I don't think you had a chance to voice it over. What are your thoughts?
I think it has been discussed already. It was just the balance of how, if we would move back a little bit to make sure that we are going the direction that we expect to be. Because in the very beginning, I didn't know that we had something compliance already, like all the other guys. And then now that we have, I was not sure how would fit that overlap in our process. So it has been discussed already.
And Lindsay, I don't know if you've had a chance to talk with Tiago on who's going to take the front end items. You or Alexander, are you both comfortable moving this to refinement, or do you have other concerns?
Shavash was so smart, right? He just left.
He was an innocent bystander in this conversation anyways. But to be clear, Sam, you told me last week and we talked that this is a higher priority. The front end work for this would be a higher priority than the follow on work for the alerts. Yes. Is that correct?
Yes.
So Alexander, given that, I mean, whether you end up picking it up or maybe Zamir or somebody who's working full stack does it, I don't think there's a harm in, us moving forward with that planning breakdown or refinement. Are you comfortable?
Yeah, sounds great. And Sam, I think you eloquently put or explained the designs, and the path forward will probably be no policy names, as you said iteratively.
Yep. Yeah, I just added a comment to that, so we'll get that mock posted on the Epic today. It's there in the design issue, but we'll finalize that today. So.
Yeah, and that sounds like a great plan to me, is leave out the names first and then add them as a follow-up.
Great. Well, I know we've gone way over time at this point.
Let me ask a quick question before you wrap up, Sam. As far as next steps for ensuring that this Epic gets broken down into implementation issues and those implementation issues get refined, what we've been doing is assigning the design issue to a front end and back end DRI to create those implementation issues. So I know Alexander will be doing the front end implementation issues. Who would be the back end DRI for creating the back end implementation issues? Because I can go ahead and assign that design issue off this morning.
I do not know.
I see three very friendly faces on this call right now, and I know one of you guys wants to do this.
You might need to just check with Tiago. I don't know.
All right. Because Tiago's got a bot that'll decide if you'd rather go that route.
Which feature is that? I'm a little bit.
My mind just asked policy.
Oh, I see.
Who's the backend DRI for that? I don't know.
Okay. Yeah, for me, between the alerts and the container scanning, I would be careful to add something else.
All right. So it'll be between Alan and John.
And Adam.
And Adam, right. All right. I'll sync up with Tiago and let him decide, or a bot. But that we'll use the design issue to handle that assignment, and we won't close that design issue out until we've got those implementation issues created.
Yeah, that sounds great. I don't know what he has planned for Adam. So it's entirely possible that he assigns him to this as part of his internship, but I don't know. Okay, so I think we can skip D. We're not really worrying about that at the moment. Tiago brought it up, but it's not ready for planning breakdown, and it's not a current priority. Probably the milestone was wrong on something in there. And then lastly, just to cover the other topics to discuss that Tiago put out. So we do have approval to hire an extra backend engineer in container security. I just added a note there. That person, so this person was actually hired to be part of a single person group working on approvals. So this person will probably be doing approvals 100% of the time when they are hired. So I just wanted to add that clarification that that allocation is like strictly for approvals. Most likely, at least the way I envision that, it's going to be that person working on scan results policies. And in the scan results policy, you can require approval. So it's a rather complex job. It's not like, some of this is going to be bigger than one milestone for one person because we already have MR approvals in the product today. So they would need to find a way to migrate the existing MR approvals into our policy editor. Anyway, there's a lot there. There's a lot more that we can discuss. I know we're short on time, but I just wanted to add a little bit of clarification about what that role will be doing. I assume that will probably be a back-end position, Lindsay, and then we'll just prioritize the front-end work or have other members of the back-end team help contribute to the front-end work as needed to balance it out. Anything else that we want to cover today? I apologize, this went so long.
I think we talked about a lot of good things. So I think it was needed.
Yeah, absolutely. And just a reminder to the team, my calendar is open to you. So anytime that I'm available, you're welcome to book something on my calendar if you ever want to talk separately. Awesome. Well, thanks everyone for the good discussion today, and we'll chat again next week.
Bye, friends.